Hi crafters, I'm going to show you how I make charms using an epoxy called ice resin or using a cabochon and a product called Glamour Glaze. First thing I want to show you is how to make a charm using a cabochon, which is a piece of glass. This is a kit. This one came from Hobby Lobby and it has all the pieces that you need, with the exception of glue. The glue that I use is Annie Howe's Glamour Glaze. I did a lot of research on the internet and this one came highly recommended. Unfortunately, you have to get it on the internet, but it leaves very little air bubbles, which is a good thing because under the glass they're very noticeable. The first thing you need to do is print what you want to put inside your charm. These particular charms are 1 inch in diameter. I have a 1 inch punch that will punch it to the correct size, which is nice. If you don't have a punch, you don't absolutely need one. What you can do is use a piece of parchment paper or something similar. You can press it inside and make yourself a template, and then you can use that template to cut what you're going to put in there. Before we can put the picture inside the charm, it needs to be sealed. The sealer that I use is from ice resin, but there's other similar paper sealers. This will keep your image from running when you put the glue on top. And it's pretty important because you have to slide the cabochon across the top to get the bubbles out, and sometimes it'll smear your image if you don't have some kind of sealer on it. So I have all my printed designs. I have them, the sealer is put on and dry, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch them out. And the easiest way to do that is to do it upside down. If your paper isn't small enough, it just needs to be cut. Then you just line it up where you want and punch it out. What you want to do first is you want to glue down your picture using a little bit of the glaze. Try not to get this layer on too thick, otherwise it'll bubble up over the sides. And that might be too much. And then we're going to let that dry. Once the glue has dried, the next step is to put the cabochon on. You want to use a small amount of the Glamour Glaze. Don't use too much because it will push out over the sides. Plus, you want to be very careful. You never want to shake it because that will put air bubbles in it, and you're trying to have as few air bubbles as possible. Then you just take the glass, set it down, and what you want to do is push it down. You'll notice I got too much glue in there. And you want to push fairly hard. What you're trying to do is make sure that you work out any air bubbles that are underneath, because if you don't get them out, they'll show and they'll kind of ruin the picture. And you can just slide the glass back and forth until it starts getting a little tacky. And, oh no, it looks like we still have a bubble in there. We do have one bubble, and I don't think I can get it out now. I don't know if you can see, but the bubbles look like little shiny spots. And the problem is, once the glue is too tacky, you can't get it to move to get those bubbles out. You can also glue the glass to an uncut sheet. It's a little bit easier to work the bubbles out that way, but then you need to make sure you get a really close cut around this so that you can glue it into the setting. If you find you have sticky residue, you can use a little goof off. Just be real careful. Use a real soft cloth so that you don't scratch the metal. The second charms I'm going to show you are made with an epoxy. This is a thick resin that will fill the little tray in the charms. The first part is basically the same. So we need to choose the picture that we're going to use. Then we need to cut it out. And for these, I've just created a little stencil, and then I use that to cut out my charms. These particular charms are from the scrapbooking section. They're very thin. They have a very thin edge. So you probably could find a glass cabochon to put on there, but it's easier for me to put the resin in. I also have a couple of deep charms, and what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to actually put a pressed flower into these. I will use the ice resin on them in the same manner that I use it for the other charms. It'll just be a little bit thicker. For these, I printed up a saying to go in the back. And I'm making sure that it's as straight as I can get it. I'm going to use the same glue to glue these down to the back. To finish the epoxy charms, we now need to add the resin or the epoxy. This is where it gets a little tricky. As you'll see, there's two separate sides to the resin. They have to go into the mixing cup at equal amounts. So you need to press very carefully on this. Then you want to carefully stir. You're trying to get it mixed up without getting too many air bubbles in. And you need to mix it for about 2 minutes. I don't know if you can see, but there are quite a lot of bubbles in here. What we're going to do is we're going to let this sit for about 10 to 15 minutes, and most of those bubbles will work their way out. So it's been about 10 minutes. You can see most of the bubbles have gone. There's still a few. We can actually try and work those out when we get these poured into the charms. I'm going to start with these that have the flowers in them, just to make sure I have enough. And you just need to be really careful, especially over the tops of the flowers. These little charms take far less, so you need to be careful that you don't overfill them. And I'm just making sure that's going to all edges. And then here's the tricky part. If you see any little bubbles, I use a little safety pin. You can stick the pin in the top of the bubbles and they'll pop. Sometimes they'll come to the surface and pop on their own. And I'll continue to do this probably a little bit over the next hour. The epoxy will start getting tacky after a little while, and then you don't want to mess with it anymore after that. So you want to try and make sure that you have any flaws either pulled to the side or bubbles popped before that time. And I'll just keep coming back and checking these until it gets tacky. So here are the finished charms. They've been sitting for about 24 hours. You can see they're nice and hard. I will show you that I did have some problems, and these are problems that you may have. If you look at this one, you can see that the epoxy kind of seeped under the paper. I probably should have had a better seal with glue. It's not terrible, but it's not perfect. This one came out a little bit better. With these charms, something weird happened here. I don't know what. It turned a little green. Doesn't really bother me. And then here are these. These didn't turn out too bad. So I hope I've given you some ideas on what to do. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments.